see. Can you hear me? Is this going on? Can you hear me without the mic? Can you? Okay, good. I know all of you are freshmen, and by the second semester now, you've all studied Homer, Virgil, Dante. You've all taken a look at Plato and Aristotle, and these are all figures. And depending on what else you've studied, these are all figures you're going to see that play a very prominent role. Plato and Aristotle, Dante, Homer, and they all play a very prominent role in the paintings we're going to be looking at today. You might say that there are, in the Western world, three great syntheses of all learning. There might be more, but at least these three. There's, first of all, Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologiae, which in the 13th century put together pretty much all of human knowledge in the light of divine revelation. And then there was Dante's Divine Comedy, which put it together precisely as literature or poetry, put together virtually all that was known. Astronomy, the arts, philosophy, it's all there. And the third is the Stanza Della Segnatura, the Raphael rooms in the Vatican. Next year, when you go to your Rome semester, one of the highlights will be seeing not only St. Peter's and the great basilicas, and not just the Vatican Museum in general, but specifically the Stanza della Segnatura and the Sistine Chapel. And they were done at approximately the same time, although for very different reasons and by different artists. Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel, and that was designed, of course, as a chapel, a church, a place of prayer, the house of the Mass where the Mass was offered, where prayer was offered. And so it had one program, and unfortunately we can't go into that here today. But the other one was for a more temporal use, and that was the Stanza della Signatura, that is the rooms of the signature, where important official documents were signed. That was the original meaning of it, signatura, okay, where for the signing of documents. And since it had a more temporal function, therefore the scheme of the paintings is different than the purely spiritual one of the Sistine Chapel. So between 1508 and 1511, under the reign of Pope Julius II, the Stanza della Signatura and the Sistine Chapel were done. And it's the stanza that we're going to be looking at today. So let's try and get a thing. I think you've got a handout, don't you, describing the beautiful things. Now, if I can get this right. I always have trouble doing this. Let's see what we got. Just I want to give you an overview. When I say this is like the Divine Comedy, like the Summa Theologiae, this is a complete synthesis of all that was known, and it intends to be. So you take a look, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 of these round things here. 1, 2, 3, 4 down here, and this is the top above the room, so at the very top, and that corresponds on your thing. Okay, this is the ceiling. You may not be able to see it very well, but where it says at the very top of your thing, imagination, poetry. Okay, this that's right here. And she is holding, this is, so to speak, poetic inspiration. And we know that because although you can't read it, it says numini afflatur. That is by divine, but using the word divine very broadly, not in a specifically theological sense. a kind of a divine inspiration. So we might say poetry is a kind of a divine activity in that sense. So that the inspiration of the poet then is the source of what's going to be happening with regard to the whole world of beauty. And over here, this is a little harder to see, but well, in fact, it's upside down. I don't know if we can see it. This is theology over here, and this is the notitia rerum divinarum. That is the knowledge of divine things. And up here, and I hope we have better things up here, you can see the woman holding the sword there, and that's justice and virtue. And over here is philosophy, which is the knowledge of causes. So the four things that are kind of set the theme, the four sources or the four goals. So we have kind of poetic inspiration, which gives inspiration to all beauty. We have the knowledge of divine things, which is theology. We have justice as giving to each his due, and as taking care of the human world of politics and the human excellences, the moral excellences. And then we have philosophy as the knowledge of the causes of the universe. So those are the four. In the four themes that are set up here, and they are going to govern the walls that was going on. So that's on the ceiling, and now we're going to have the walls, and I'll say something more about these others in a little bit, right here and here. So we'll I'll get into that a little bit later on. Okay. Sorry.
I just looked for that one.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, good. Sorry, I was pointing over there. Maybe we can say here just a little bit before we get to the. There, yeah, because I want to get to the walls. I'll get to the pandux later. Sorry. Okay, this is what we could see for poetry. You could see holding a book of poems, and then numine afflator, that is by divine inspiration. Okay, I'll come back to these. Okay, but I want to. And this is what we saw. You can see justice is giving to each, attributing to each his due use, cuique suum attributor, that is, giving to each his due. And then for philosophy, as we said, the causarum cognitio, the knowledge of causes. And now see if I can get to the actual walls. Okay, now that's under good. So we got the first one there. I'm going to come back to that. This is Mount Parnassus here. You can see this is, this is the moral virtues, and I'll come back to this. Okay. As you walked in other words, it was a room, and you go through a door, and the first thing that would hit your eye as you walked through the door was this. And this is the School of Athens philosophy. Notice the whole room. So it's got the School of Athens on one side, and then directly over the door for instance, if you say out there, the wall over there, over the door, would be the sacred theology. Okay, so philosophy and theology would be on opposing walls. And on the side walls would be Mount Parnassus with beauty and the moral virtues and justice. So you have the beauty over here and justice and virtue over here, and philosophy here and theology here. In other words, encompassing the whole of human reality. So everything. It's a literal summa in paint. Okay. So we start off, as you would enter the room, this would be the first thing you would see. Now, what do you see here? This is, as you might be able to tell, this is Plato and this is Aristotle. And if Plato is holding, though you can't see it, but it's there in the book, one of his books called the Timaeus. And notice how he is pointing up. Okay, now you've all studied Phil and Eth, you've all read the Republic in your Phil and Eth courses. Haven't you all read the Republic? Okay? Do you remember how it is? It points up to the world of the forms. You know, you go up to the forms, ultimately, you climb the divided line, you get out of the cave, and you go up to ultimately the good, and it's up there. Okay, that's what he's pointing to, as you can see, there. And you've all read the Nicomachean Ethics of Aristotle, haven't you? Okay, and you know then that, and that's what he's holding, it's marked, although it doesn't appear very clearly here. Notice how he is pointing out, not here like Plato, pointing up to the forms, but out to the world of action. Okay? So, in other words, by putting into practice temperance and courage and prudence and the other virtues, then you're able to actually flourish in the world. So those two, and this is, so to speak, the School of Athens, a huge building, and over here you can see with the lyre is Apollo, statue of Apollo, who indicates theoretical reason. And over here in the armor is Athena, or Minerva, and she is practical wisdom. Theoretical wisdom, practical wisdom. So to speak, Plato represents theoretical wisdom, on Aristotle's side, Minerva or Athena representing practical wisdom. And you can see there's an open vault up here to the skies, okay, to the sky above. And so this is all taking place in a kind of a huge building which is open to the skies and yet leads out into the world. Okay? So that we have here, and there are different figures there that are taking place. And you notice so that they are on either side of Plato or Aristotle. And thus you're able to make out certain characters. Thus we have down here is, for instance, at the lowest level, here is Pythagoras. And this is one of the Arab thinkers, Averroes by name. But and Pythagoras, who did, like the Pythagorean theorem, one of the early mathematicians. And if you can see it over here, this is Euclid doing geometry. He's got the compass. He's doing geometry here. And he's surrounded by different thinkers. Over here is Socrates and Alcibiades, one of the students of Socrates, in a helmet. And so the different thinkers that each one going on. This is Epicurus. Notice how he's against an unfinished pillar. And that indicates kind of the unfinished character of his thought. And you probably all know Diogenes, who tried to look for one honest man. You've all heard he lived in a barrel, and he held a lamp in the daylight. People asked him, why are you holding a lamp? in broad daylight. I'm looking for an honest man in Athens. Okay? There was this implication being there weren't many. So they have him, and he's kind of by himself, as you notice. And here is Heraclitus. You notice how against a stone, and he's sort of lost in thought, as you can see. He's sort of, lost in thought. And he doesn't belong to any school. Neither of these two really belong to any school of thought. They're not Platonists. They're not Aristotelians. They're not of any particular school. Whereas all these people are engaged in conversation with each other, and you can see how it is they're talking and wondering. And so in each case, there's lively conversation about mathematics. There's the liberal arts here. There's the trivium and the quadrivium. That is, there's grammar and there's a rhetorician, and as well as the logic of philosophy and the different branches of mathematics I already indicated. So you've got all of human learning here represented. And these are all pagans. All of these are ancient pagans that are in this in this room. So we could go through, and if you wanted to, I could identify some other characters. A lot of them, we're not sure just who they are, but it's in any event some of the great figures from classical antiquity, some of the great thinkers. So yes. So here we have, just to give you, this is Socrates, and as we said, Alcibiades, and over here we have, Euclid, Euclid with the thing, and Zoroaster, and the Ptolemy, going over here with the Euclidean, the mathematics side. So, and that's of course, so you've got here a kind of going up, ascending from the mathematics, going up to the Socrates and the quest for dialectic. The quest for dialectic, leading to the forms, leading to ultimate knowledge. So you can see there's a kind of an ascending movement with the two characters of Heraclitus and Diogenes, who are by themselves. Okay, they're not quite engaged in any of these conversations that are going on. So here we have then, this is all that human reason can understand. Everything the world that reason can understand is portrayed here, and it's divided between Plato and Aristotle. Now, what's the big problem that Raphael leaves us with? How do we get those two together? Plato pointing up to the forms, Aristotle pointing out to the world of action with the virtues, and the various disciplines surrounding them, mathematics, rhetoric, dialectic, and so forth. How do we get these two together, and it's left unresolved? It's just either this or this, and how can you bring those two together? That's the big problem that this painting leaves us with, and it's designed to leave us with. Okay, you following? That's got it. Now, okay, good. There, I got that. Good. Now, this is, like I said, this would be on this wall, and the wall over the door would be the directly opposite to it. So after you had, so to speak, turned your face, turned from there, you turn back to the door, and this is what meets you. And this is called the Disputa on the Holy Eucharist, or the exaltation of the Holy Eucharist. So philosophy and opposite theology. Okay? Human reason, divine inspiration. Now, you'll notice it's got three layers, three levels. Okay, up here is the realm of the divine, God the Father. You can see him here holding the world, creator of the world. and the angels with him. And here's his son, Christ. And this is, there's Blessed Virgin here, and John the Baptist, by that cross pointing to him. And John the Baptist stands for, he's the last and greatest of the prophets, and his mother. So to speak, the ones who brought him forth and point to him, and here's Christ there. And Christ sends the Holy Spirit in the form of a dove, here. And over here are the saints who are with Christ, the Old and New Testament saints. Okay, so that in each case we have the different saints. I'll go through them in a minute, but to just take it. And here are little putti, little angels holding the four Gospels, which the Holy Spirit inspires. And then down here is the realm of earth. Okay, and you can see over here are some small houses, kind of thing, being built, and over here a large temple is being built. Okay? Now, what do we have? Right in the center, you have got this altar, and we have two figures, and notice how they are pointing, reproducing the gestures of Plato and Aristotle. Here's the one pointing like Aristotle out, you can see, pointing out, and like Plato, pointing up. Okay? So in other words, that here we have the Eucharist, which is the center of this thing resting on the altar, and it, so to speak, brings together the two worlds. It is in Michael, as Raphael portrays it, it's the presence of Christ in the world, okay, who is also at the right hand of the Father. And so we have pointing up, so the Eucharist takes you to the Father, and the Eucharist takes you out into the world. Christ is going in both ways. So he's present according in the theology of in the way. So in Catholic theology, the Eucharist has both that dimensions. It's the presence of the heavenly Christ, and that heavenly Christ is here on earth, guiding and inspiring our actions. So that's why this is the centerpiece, which links the earthly, the realm of the saints, and then the third level, the realm of God himself. So you've got the earthly church right down here, the heavenly church, the church triumphant here, and then you have the divine realm up here with the angels surrounding God. Okay? Now, what do we see here? You've got different figures, each of whom is associated in one way or another with the Eucharist. Okay, so what we have is okay. Yeah, so we can get a few of these as to who they are. We can identify a few of these. So here we have on this side, so to speak, Pope Gregory the Great, okay, who was important, a great preacher in Rome. You can see him with the tiara, the papal tiara. This is St. Ignatius of Antioch, who's you'll be reading in Western theological tradition next year, who's one of the early martyrs, and St. Justin Martyr. One of these are both 2nd century A.D. thinkers, so Ignatius and Justin, and both were very important people who explained the Eucharist, and so in its different dimensions. Okay, now you can see over here, this is St. Augustine and Bishop's Mitre, and how he's teaching. Okay, and so you can see him teaching, and here is St. Thomas Aquinas here, and here is St. Bonaventure. So we have some of the great saints, really, You can tell by the different thing in the Franciscan habit and the Dominican habit. Unfortunately, he didn't include any Cistercians. Well, that's he should have. Okay. And then over here we have somebody who's pointing. Notice how it is. And to us in the audience, you see this? We're looking at this. Here's somebody who's pointing us. Here's the way in. If you want to understand reality, point. You go here. So in the different cases, there are different historical and figures for the Eucharist. But in any event, the big point here is to recognize in this understanding, it is the Eucharistic Christ who links the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit, and the earthly world, all three. So the way up for us, come here to get to the Father, and the Father, the way down to us, Father through the Son and in the Spirit. Okay? So the thing, just to get you a few of the of who these characters are, over here, you can see the Saint Stephen, the first martyr in the Acts of the Apostles. He was stoned. You can see him at the palm of martyrdom here. And you can see St. John, the evangelist, writing here. And this is Jeremiah the prophet. And this is over here with the tablets, Moses. So you've got, in each case, you've got all of these. Over here, take a look. You can see with the laurel leaves, Dante. Can you see that? Dante over here. Okay. So, and then different popes, and I said Pope Gregory over here, who wrote a book of a great moral teacher, his book Commentary on Job, the moral teaching of Job, is right here. So we've got quite a few of the great saints and scholars of theology in this. Okay? Now, okay. Now, the other here is, so if you were to turn, now we get to beauty. We've seen natural reason in the School of Athens, philosophy, Plato and Aristotle, and all that natural reason can know. We've seen divine revelation in the Disputa on the Holy Eucharist. Now we go to one of the other walls. Okay? And you can see here, this is Apollo. And he's playing the lyre. Okay? And each of these, and he is surrounded by the 9 muses. Okay? So the 9 muses, and by the way, here's Dante again. And so what we have, the 9 muses from which we get our word music. Music is the activity of the muses. And a museum, okay, is place of the muses. But the music here, however, is used in a much broader sense than what we are likely to use it. We are likely to use it to meaning, something that is sung or simply played like on an instrument, and that is not what but the original meaning of the muses, the 9 muses, were. So to get to the moment. Yeah, here we are. Okay. So here we have then. So as I see, let me see if I can broaden this a little. This is gives me wanted to get the 9 muses, but in a fuller shot. Okay. Yeah, that's justice. There's here. There, beautiful. Okay. Now, you can see here, good, this, you can see this is divided up. Here's the door, as we said, so this is one of the doors. There were 2 doors, the one for the theology and one over this one, okay? Now, here you can see the beauty. This is concerned with beauty, not with truth, okay, which whether rational or revealed, but with the beautiful. There's, as we said, Apollo playing the lyre, and so this is the life of poetic inspiration. Here's Dante, and here is Homer, the blind poet. You can see here, he's going on. You can see he's blind, and down here are different ancient and modern poets. But over here you can see holding the mask. This is the mask of comedy there, and that is Thalia with the comic mask, and there is with the tragic mask over here. Yes, over here the tragic mask. That is Melpomene. That's one of these, so comedy, tragedy. There is epic poetry. Over here, and there is Clio, history. So history, lyric, love poetry, tragedy, comedy, dance, terpsichore and dance. She's holding the lyre, okay, and the astronomy, when he was holding the globe and compass. So in each case, all of the liberal arts and the poetry. So life as beautiful, so to speak, life as unfallen Eden, where it is celebration and joy. Okay, that's what Mount Parnassus, this picture on Mount Parnassus is like. In other words, what I think all of us would like life to be. We would all like it to be, so to speak, an unfallen Eden, a time of music and dance and celebration and joy. Okay, and that's what this is portraying. And now you can see below it, over here, because here's you have the door going for it, that this is Alexander the Great here at the tomb of Achilles. So Homer, in other words, and then Alexander the Great world conqueror. And over here, this is when Augustus here, the emperor, the Roman emperor, when Virgil gave orders, since the Aeneid was not complete, he hadn't given it his final run through, so he ordered the Aeneid to be burnt. And Augustus says, no way. So he stops the burning, and you can see the flames, and they're about ready to throw the book in, and we have it. So you've got here Achilles, the Iliad, over here the Aeneid, with Aeneas, and going on Homer and Virgil, all pointing up on the side of Mount Parnassus, with all the muses, with dance, with joy, celebration, and joys of life. Okay? Is it good? Now, this leads us then to the final wall. Okay. Yes. That gives us yeah, this will be fine. Good. This will be fine. Okay. Now, here we have, if intellect is for reason, is for philosophy, if faith is for revelation, if inspiration, poetic inspiration, is for the muses, especially poetry. Though it is interesting of the nine, just to make a sidebar here, the one art he did not include was painting. You'd think painting would have been up there, along with dance and music and poetry. Painting isn't up there. Okay, so that one he kept off the thing. Perhaps he was thinking painting is ultimately the art that can give expression to all. Okay, so that's not just one more specialized art. But in any event, okay, here we have the moral and theological virtues. Now this is in other words, here's the life of the good. So not the life of theoretical reason or of revealed truth, nor the life of beauty, but of the life of the good. And here you can see up here this little angel pointing up. That's faith. Okay? And then here is temperance, the first of the cardinal virtues. Notice holding the reins. So in other words, by which we discipline ourselves. We, so to speak, rein ourselves in. Okay? So doing this. And for the disciplined person of faith, then there is hope. And that's the lamp that is being done. Okay? And then here, it's not so clear, but it's true, that this is prudence. You can see a young woman's face here and an old woman's face here. Okay, back and forth. And she is looking in a mirror. Okay? A mirror held up. She's holding up and assisted by an angel. That is self-knowledge. In other words, looking in a mirror to gain self-knowledge. So you have the temperance, and you have then the self-knowledge, and then with faith and hope. And then there is courage. You can see kind of in the armor, holding the tree. And then over here is charity, the little angel, so to speak, stripping the tree of its fruit. Okay? And what's the point? Charity. In other words, courage protects the land, and the gifts of the land, the food that it gives, the fruits of the tree, come by charity distributing them. So you have here the three theological virtues: faith, hope, charity, and three of the four moral virtues. That is, temperance, prudence, and courage. Courage, protecting the good things. Notice justice isn't there yet. Okay, so you can see how he's got. So for the kind of the moral life, the social life. Okay, now in this, there's also down below here. What we're going to see here is this is Justinian, who in this over here, Justinian, who is receiving the Roman civil law. It's being handed to him here. Justinian was the emperor, and he was in charge of the laws. So he's the one who made the code, the first code of civil law, and he's in charge of that. And over here we have Pope Gregory. You can see by the tiara, and he is receiving the copy of the basis, the decretals, which were the basis of canon law in the church. So law goes forth by which human life is regulated. Okay, now, so this gives then the four walls, and we took a look at the four medallions, how it is. If I can, now I'd like to take a quick look at the links between them, if we can, okay, to see how it is. Because there are different movements going on here. This is not grasped at one seeing. I remember when I was on the Rome campus, I went back many times with some of the other professors, including Dr. Wilhelmsen here, to look at the this, because this goes there's just many times you'll have to see it. You can't absorb it in one look. You have to go back many, many times before it fully reveals itself. So I hope you spend a good deal of time next year in the Vatican, because in the Vatican museums, because it is good. Okay, can we get the these up here? Yeah. Okay, let's stop here. Okay. Now, this is. Let's see if your sheet has it. Does your sheet have that on that? Good. Okay. Yeah. Right. I've got to find mine. Just a moment. And you have an extra. Okay. Now, we've taken a look, kind of, as you can see, at poetry, starting with philosophy, theology, then poetry, and now the social virtues. Okay, the moral and theological virtues. Now we're going to take a look here. This is the story of what links it. It's Apollo and Marsyas. Notice how it is on your sheets. That links poetry and theology. Why? Because it's a story from classical poetry of how Apollo and Marsyas decided to challenge him. Marsyas, this low character, decided to challenge Apollo to a thing, and of course Apollo beat him, and so he had Marsyas flayed alive, and you can see him getting ready, to be flayed, and here's Apollo getting ready to flay him. Okay? Now, what's the point there on that? That it's a poem, yes, but it points to the fact that that which is best in the human should control what is lowest in us, not bad, but simply beneath our reason. And when this revolts against reason, not cooperates with it, then we have a disorder in the human being. In other words, that somebody who's anger or somebody who's hatred or anything else gets out of hand, conquers their reason, and they go ahead and kill or whatever. Okay? Well, that's, so to speak, what was going on here, that instead of being together, this one, the Marsyas, the lower passions, not cooperated with reason, but rebelled against it, and so got punished. Okay? Now, that links poetry on the one hand and theology on the other. In other words, so to speak, Marsyas sinned. So, and that's told in a poetic way. So you probably know this is going on, so it links the two. And then over here is the prime mover at the top of your page. Okay? This is, so to speak, here's the world, and it's being spun by the divine powers. Okay? And that links both poetry and philosophy. So you think of Dante. Okay? You think of the Prima Mobile of Dante. You've all read that, haven't you? You came across the Prima Mobile. Okay, so here it is, right there, and so that's both poetry. It links poetry to philosophy. This first mover. Okay. Yeah. Now, this is going around linking philosophy and justice, is the judgment of Solomon. You see the baby, you remember the story in the scriptures about how Solomon saw, the child was born, and two babies were born, and one died, and the other, woman fell over and crushed it, so it couldn't breathe, and they both claimed the living child. And so they were both fighting over it. So Solomon said, let's stop this dispute. There's no way I can tell whose baby it belongs to. We'll cut the baby in half and give half to each. And the woman says, yes, very good. That's fair. We each get half the baby. And the other says, no, she can have it. Why? Because giving half would kill the baby. So then Solomon said, only the mother would truly say, I'd be willing to give up the baby, let her have it so that it can live. And so he says, give the child to the woman who said, let the child live. Okay, so here you have the two women who are fighting, and here you have Solomon, and here you can see the sword getting ready to cut it in half, the baby in half, and so this is the judgment of Solomon, and that links both this right reason of philosophy, kind of the ethics of Aristotle pointing out, and justice being done in the whole moral sphere. And over here, linking justice and theology, you can see is Adam and Eve in the fall. There's the serpent, there's Adam, there's Eve, the serpent tempting, and then bringing them to the fall. And so they were punished, expelled from the garden, and because they listened to the voice of the serpent. And so you have here the theology and justice all linked. Okay, let me
try and get all this put together if we can. There are, when I said this is a soup, so to speak, puts everything together. This is a summa in painting. You've got all of human life, building of the houses, the building of the temple. You've got the whole realm in which our lives are orchestrated here on earth. You've got going up to the divine. You've got the joys, the inspiration. Let's go to the concert, the theater, the joys. And you've got law and the virtues. Okay, so that in each case, you've got the whole of human life presented. Now, how are we to read this? I suggest that there are 4 different movements. I said you have to go back. Look at here's the one I didn't get to give to you. This is in the conduct of justice over the moral virtues, where the woman's holding the mirror, looking at herself, and Fatan's pointing out, and the temperance with the reins. Okay? So justice, which is the synthesis, the sum, and kind of high point of all the moral virtues. Now, how do we read this? I suggest there are 4 different ways. First of all, philosophy and theology. Read it for using our analogy, side to side. You look philosophy, natural reason, and give you revelation, sacred theology, knowledge that can give you. There's a second way, poetry and the moral virtues, moral and theological virtues. One directing you to the life of joy and, so to speak, the difficulties of life, the need restraint and ignorance. Okay. There's a third way that this can be looked at. It's circular. You see this, no matter where you start, on each side, for instance, if you start with poetry, on one side is philosophy, on the other side is theology. If you go with justice, then philosophy on one side, theology on the other. If you go with theology, poetry and justice on each side, and they are linked through Apollo and Marsyas, through the prime mover, the prima mobile, the judgment of Solomon, and the fall. So in other words, each one leads to the next. So it is a perfect circle. So when you have, if you start with philosophy, then that's going to lead to justice and ultimately to poetry. If you go with justice, that leads to theology. If you go to theology, that leads to poetry, which comes back to philosophy. So a perfect circle in which each of these through the different things that John and Solomon will probably over the Apollo and Marsyas in the fall. He uses precisely to link the four together. So that's a third way we can look at it. And there's a fourth way. And that is that all of these lead to revelation or theology, in Raphael's vision. Each of them is incomplete. That is, Parnassus gives you the beautiful light, the unfallen Eden, but it doesn't give you the strength of the virtues. And the virtues, without, so to speak, the arts, be a dull life. And so to speak, reason, as we saw with the looking up, it was empty. You know, the pointed to the empty sky, and we couldn't get Plato and Aristotle together. But in Revelation, the Eucharist brings all of those together. It brings the beauty together. That's why Dante is there in the point of Revelation, not just in poetry. And that's why you have the laws going there as well for justice and for right conduct, and why it is that St. Thomas and St. Bonaventure are there to reason and all taken up. And instead of having an empty sky, you have it pointed to the sky, which is full of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So to speak, the Eucharist combines all of the different points that each one is separate and doesn't have the others, and takes it up in itself and brings it all to heaven as it comes down from earth. Thank you. Are there any questions? I'm happy to do it again.
I have a question.
Please.
As you reread and reminded yourself of all of the things in this one canon, do our historians know how much Raphael was told to do and how much was left to his own imagination?
He proposed it curiously. There was actually, the room was already begun. Sodoma and others had already begun it. And he proposed this to Julius II, Pope Julius II. And Julius was immediately brought outlines of it. And Julius was immediately taken and gave permission to destroy all the previous works. We're going to have this one, developed.
So we think it was his idea?
Yeah, I guess, right, Raphael's. I wasn't saying he didn't learn it from others. But, good. Other questions? So I do, no other questions I noticed late, but there's three of them that I had to cut short because we need what I did here. This is, like I say, with the comedy, which you've already read, some of you may have read parts of the Summa Theologiae, and you certainly will in coming semesters more. And with those two, this is the most comprehensive view, including everything that I know. So it will pay your time, when you have extra hours, you want to go into the Vatican, especially after you've seen everything in Rome, there's one, you want to go there and just sort of speak around and ponder and think about it, and then think about where you like it. So we saw how it was the fellow was pointing in the dispute on the Eucharist. He was saying here,